Have you ever been told that your symptoms are just made up, that they're just anxiety? Maybe they're just in your head? Well, actually, you still know that something is wrong, right? But deep down, you know that something is wrong. And it's not in your head. It could very well be in your environment, or it could even be in the air. So, in today's episode, we're uncovering one of the most overlooked causes of chronic illness: mold infection and toxicity. It can include brain fog, fatigue, autoimmune flares, hormone chaos, absolutely, and it can mimic nearly every diagnosis in the book. So you're going to hear a powerful story that Nurse Richelle is going to share with you, some of the symptoms that left her searching for answers until she discovered that the biggest toxin wasn't in her labs, it was hiding in her walls.
Today's episode is sponsored by Vitality Health RX Supplements. Whether you're an athlete, a busy professional, or just someone looking to prioritize health, Vitality Health RX has what you need. With premium ingredients and rigorous quality control, their supplements support your body's natural functions. Visit shopvrx.com and use code FEELGREAT15 for 15% off your first order. Thanks to Vitality Health RX for sponsoring this episode. Now let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to the Feel Better, Feel Great podcast, episode 162, Mold, Toxicity, and Environmental Illness. In each episode, we dive into the wonders of holistic health and functional medicine so that you are empowered to understand what are ways to lead a healthier, happier life. I'm your host, Dr. Andrea McSwain, with our clinic's lead nurse, Richelle Korienek. We're very excited to connect the dots between your environment and your health. If you are new to me, please like and subscribe and click the bell for this channel. Also, please share this with someone who keeps being told that it's all in their head, right? They go to a doctor and they hear that. That's not great. And you can also maybe connect them to the previous podcast we did about how conventional medicine is failing us, because they need to probably hear both things. Because this takes a lot of convincing, actually. A lot of people just don't think they can get sick from their environment.
Right.
Okay, so of course, remember that this information provided is educational only, but we want you to have the resources to be able to go to your healthcare provider and share with some of your concerns and have some knowledge behind that. Right? That's important. Right. That's how we want you to feel better and feel great.
Did you know that mycotoxins are going mainstream?
Is this a joke? Is this going to go somewhere? Really? Is this like a dad joke, but you're not a dad?
Well, again, we've been going through a lot of trending topics on Instagram and on our other, social media platforms, and people are talking about mold. Which finally is happening. There is some very big names that have been talking about mold, like Gwyneth Paltrow. That was one of the ones that I had seen. But I think that's really interesting that now mycotoxins are kind of coming into a forefront.
Right. Before it was like, oh, that can't be real. And I just want to say that there is mold exposure that people have had for a long time. And mold exposure is the moldy leaves in the fall. Or it's, sometimes when people clean out the old shed or the basement, they might see it on some books or something that can get wet. And it can be a place where something can grow, black, green, The issue is it's when it gets inside and grows in your body. That's a mold infection that leads to toxicity. And that is where people can't really see it. It's this invisible illness, but they definitely feel it. And like I said, brain fog. Sometimes you can see it too when the whole family's involved. If they live in one home, that's a really big indicator that mold infection is going on. And it's something to do with the house.
Right.
And some people say sick houses. That's been said for a while. The other issue is a lot of times people live in houses that they don't own. And if you have a house that you don't own and it's making you sick, right? Or if your workplace has mold and they won't acknowledge it. I remember in my 20s, I went to this yoga studio in Tempe. So this is like hot and dry, right? It's not like Michigan. And people come into my office, so I'm digressing a moment, but people come into my office and like, mold? How could I have mold in my house? And I'm like, okay, well, Michigan is known for being dry and not having basements. There's no rain here. It doesn't ever get cold. So I kind of like maybe a little tongue in cheek, but it's like there are places in particular that are harboring like mold, right? Because they're wet half the year. They have basements. There's mold. That's just it. And then there's places that you would never think that, like Tempe, Arizona. Right by the university. I went to a new yoga studio. Really lovely couple. And she was the yoga studio instructor, and they share, and this married couple owned it. And I went, a few times, and all of a sudden, like they weren't having classes anymore, or they were being canceled. And this young yoga teacher was sick with mold. And other toxicities that can occur in a basement. Right. But it was shocking because that was a long time ago, and I was like, it kind of sat in the back of my mind, like, how could someone be so sick from that? Especially who had been so healthy. I mean, she just basically went, brr, and so anyway, if that's you, right? I mean, if you move into a place and you're like, gosh, I can't even move my body. I can't do anything. I can't maintain my relationships. I can barely drag myself to work and back. Mold until proven otherwise. So I'm really glad people are talking about it. It's always kind of interesting to present the idea in the clinic because it just seems so foreign. But, again, I remind people like 99% of the DNA and RNA genetic material in our body isn't our own. I mean, we really are inhabited by other organisms. So we are fodder, and we are damp and warm, and, there's a lot of fluid in our bodies. So these places can very much harbor mold. So it's not in your head. It's in the air.
Oh, it's not in your head. It's in the air. That's a really interesting way to put it. But it is definitely something that, we have patients that come into the clinic, and they do ask, questions about like just very specific symptoms, and they're like really looking for answers because they've been to every doctor, or they've had a lot of issues with the treatments that they've gotten from other physicians and things like that, and they just don't feel like it is what like it says it is. Like I remember a specific patient that had been getting anxiety medication for a long period of time, but they really didn't feel like that was the answer to why they had anxiety, because they didn't really have anxiety before. And they looked more into their environmental exposure, and they did find that they had mold in their house. So I think that is something that is often overlooked in more conventional routes of medicine. And I think that's not entirely their fault. I mean, there is also, it's not something that you're going to find in like a basic blood panel. A lot of times you have to do a specialized, testing in order to find some of that stuff, or have knowledge as to what mold looks like as a physician, in order for you to be able to navigate that issue with the patient.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have some, really significant examples in the clinic, young people, babies, like small children who start having a lot of anxiety. They start actually sometimes even hurting themselves. And then they get put on psych meds, and then they become zombies, and they're growing, not learning who they are. They're growing, taking this medicine. All the while, the mold continues to grow inside their body, and that's why the meds don't work. They're anxious, they're depressed, they struggle to learn, and then they move, and maybe they feel a little better. But it's grown inside them, and that takes some work. But it's definitely worth doing because it's only going to get worse. I've seen homes, like I said, where the whole family has mold infection. leading to, I mean, really the worst ones are the neurologic. I mean, I say that, but it's really when the psychiatric disorders come on, that the mold infection and the penetration in the brain is just, I mean, it's life destructive at that point. You can have life altering, obviously, with an illness where you're exhausted, your quality of life goes down. But mold has such a psychiatric impact. Right. And that's and it's so treatable. And it has to just be made aware. So, there is testing, very simple testing. There's a lot of ways to get mold out of the body that are very effective, which is cool, actually. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not so difficult to treat mold if we would just acknowledge it and then treat it. And our goal, too, is to first of all help you understand, what are the symptoms, right? So it's kind of 3 top symptoms, right? The nervous system. So again, psychosis, anxiety, depression, cognitive issues, mood swings, right? The immune system, sick all the time because you already have an infection. So now you get any kind of other exposure, it's going to amplify that illness. Inflammation, now autoimmunity, it's in the body. So then it's starting to actually trigger even some cancer, turns on some cancer genes. It really gets stuck in the liver. It's just growing, and it's pretty significant to alter our immune system. And then the hormonal system. So fatigue, PMS, thyroid dysfunction. Remember, these are kind of your top 3 systems, right? Other than your cardiovascular system. I say there's systems for the systems. And your nervous system penetrates your whole body. Your immune system goes through your whole body. Your hormone system goes through your whole body. And these top systems now mean the mold is affecting your entire body, right? And not to mention your liver, your gut, your lungs, of course, right? Your brain, which is part of the nervous system, but in and of itself, they have these individual infections. So I see this situation very much. And so you want to say oh, wow, maybe that is me. Maybe it's just pervasive. And that's why I'm in kind of multi-system organ dysfunction, because it's growing in your body. It's growing in your body.
One thing that we also talk about a lot with our patients is the places that mold can be hiding specifically. And just places that you wouldn't think that mold would be within the home, and also that it doesn't have to have a smell. It can just be there. Right. So I mean, we talk a lot about making sure your HVAC system is does not have mold in it. We talk about basements, crawl spaces, under sinks that can get wet, by bathtubs, places that can harbor that wet, like under wood or whatever, that kind of wetness. And then again, there are some older homes that have it even behind their wallpapers, behind other things, and so that's where it may not feel like you don't see water in the basement, or you don't see standing water somewhere, but it could be hidden. So that's why those tests and kind of navigating those things within your home is really important, as well as like you said, there are places that you have no control over because you don't own it or whatever. And one that I'm specifically thinking of, other than my own story, is when you go to college and you're in a dorm room, specifically.
Right.
I think that one is very, very interesting. I personally didn't have a bad experience when I was in the dorms, but I have heard many stories of other friends and other people that have had illness once they got to school, specific. So something else that I think is interesting that we do within the clinic specifically is utilizing NAD.
Right, absolutely.
So yeah, if you want to speak to that a little bit, I think that is something that's very new even to me when it comes to the science behind it, but I think it's super impactful for our patients that, utilize it.
Yeah, we actually have a research article that talks about how mold will turn on a cancer gene, and NAD can prevent that cancer gene from being turned on, and that's in the liver. So NAD is how you make energy. And when you look at all these symptoms, you look at really a lot of symptoms, it's a lot of extra work for the body. So then the body gets tired. I mean, in very simplistic way to say this, but if you give the body energy, which is NAD, right? That is a precursor to energy. That is something that is energy in our body. It's like currency. If we give that, then we can really get the fighting going on. And mold doesn't really have a chance. The thing that people too might want to understand is mold grows like with this insidious, like blanket-like effect, right? So it's a very different kind of thing than how we think about infection. When we think about infection, we think about bacterial, like we can see it in, there's like a pocket of pus or purulent drainage. It's red and inflamed, but mold actually gets in and it blankets. So it really grows and then it smothers that tissue. And so it's progressive. Sometimes it happens very quickly, but it's also very, very progressive and insidious. And so you really notice your quality of life is somewhat down, but you don't really recognize the severity of what's happening because of this like just slow kind of like taking over in the body. And so NAD just like snaps your body into making energy, and then you get a lot of really impactful benefit because now your body's like, oh, I don't want that there. Now I recognize that I have the energy to recognize a problem. So immune surveillance is improved. Okay, now I have the energy in the mitochondria, in the body, in the immune system to fight this insidious thing.
Right.
And so NAD does really well. And at the same time, it's really helping you in a lot of other areas too. And that's the cool thing about NAD is it's coming in. We really like to do it IV. We do it injection. We also like it sublingual. So oral doesn't do much, and there's some patches and stuff, but the sublingual is really a way if you don't have access to infusion for NAD. Yeah. But yeah, I love that there's something you can do about it that actually is root cause treatment, which is what I call NAD. A lot of the things we do here are root cause treatment. So, we look at that as a treatment, but also removing the foreign enemy, right? Like for removing the, so when you're in nursing school, medical school, they always say like, remove the offending agent. And first of all, if you are really mold susceptible, you are not the one to remove the offending agent. Second of all, treat mold removal as a biohazard because it very much is. Right. And so often people in our practice acknowledge a mold infection and then they get in a situation where they're, having to commit to do something like take their family members' items that have been in their house for 20 years, or they're cleaning out someone's house, or they're going into the shed to grab stuff because their parents are like, please get this out of my shed. It's been here for 15 years. And they go in there, just like nonchalantly, just not recognizing that they're exposing themselves to something that is a biohazard for them because they have an infection. And so they're very susceptible. And I have, and they don't even know it. I had a patient come in. She knew she had mold. She's had a lot of anxiety in her life. And we're doing good. We're cooking. I got a good clip going in her health and stuff. And then, I had to go to the eye doctor because my eye was all red. And I took a corticosteroid, which made the redness go down. Well, yeah, but it also suppressed your immune system. What were you doing that made your eye red? Oh, I was going through, a family member that died. I was going through their possessions that hadn't been touched in like 20 years. Was there mold? Yes. Did that eye get mold? Yes. And then what do? We just take away the symptoms when we use corticosteroids. So instead of actually treating this area, right, now we've actually suppressed the immune system. So then it's not helping us. So be leery of, if it's inflamed and hot and aggravated, that we want to throw corticosteroids on it, particularly if you've had enough mold exposure that you could very well have a mold infection. And that's really debilitating for the immune system to throw some corticosteroids in an area, and the immune system's trying to fight it. You've mounted an immune response. It's red, it's inflamed, it hurts. These are all classic definitions of having an immune response to an infecting agent. Well, then if you douse it with cortisone cream, right? Then you're suppressing your immune system. Mm-hmm. And the mold loves that. Mm-hmm. Not to personify mold.
Right.
But it definitely allows it to grow.
Yeah, I mean, that really speaks to a lot of like what I went through with my mold exposure story. But yeah, I had lived in this house in Lansing, specifically where there was mold within the basement, but I wasn't really aware of this at the time, and it was, a landlord property, so it wasn't mine or anything like that. But I would find myself working, in the clinic, whatever, feeling really good most of the day, and then I would go home and I would be so tired that I really couldn't even like have energy to make food. I had no energy to like do housework. I had no energy to do anything, and I would find myself kind of couch surfing when I got home. Like I would go to the couch, lay down on the couch, and then I'd be asleep. Like it was pretty instantaneous. I couldn't really I had a lot more anxiety when I was at home. And again, I thought, maybe it was more related to maybe the neighborhood or maybe something else. Like I really didn't know what it was, but it was bothering me a lot. Where I would get very anxious at home, or I'd feel my pulse, like, and it was like racing, and I'm like, I'm okay though, like I don't understand. And I was getting a little bit more depressed and in certain times of the year and things like that, which again I was like, oh, seasonal, that's what it was. But I never really had too much of a problem in the past, so it was very new to me. And I thought, again, being told a lot of the time that as you get older these things happen, that kind of statement, I was like, okay, well, this is what this looks like. But again, I was only 24, 25 at the time, so I thought, it wasn't like, it shouldn't have been this big of a shift for me. So I stayed in this home for about 3 years, and I started noticing even acne on my face. Again, just very fatigued, very exhausted. My partner also was very fatigued, very exhausted, had a lot of, anxiety as well. Like we were both just kind of living in this like house and not really realizing that was the environment that was harming us at the time. Mm-hmm. But we tend to feel good when we left it. We never really had too much of an issue. Mm-hmm. So again, not really putting two and two together until it was later in life. But we did recognize that it was harming us. And so we found a new place, and I thankfully got moved into that place. And I remember going back to the other house to grab some stuff. And when I walked in the door, it was like a wall hit me. Like the amount of mold, like the smell, I never smelt it before. And then I walked in after living somewhere else, and it was like horrible. Mm-hmm. Like I just felt like I couldn't even breathe almost. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I cannot believe that this is what I was living in. Like it was very very scary for me when I finally like was able to understand the amount of toxicity basically I was living in. Mm-hmm. And how like my habits were different once I was at the other house, and how I felt was different, and I could stay up past, not really, because I still am a very sleepy person, but I could stay up, a little bit later than usual instead of going home and falling asleep at 8 o'clock, and just things like that I felt like before I wasn't really able to handle. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was a huge change for me. And thankfully I work here, so the treatments of like getting the mold out of my body, has been easily accessible for me. But, you know, even doing like ozone, like in my nose and in my ears, like I felt like completely different leaving. And so yeah, there was a lot of stuff within that other house that we had to get rid of because we realized that it was just absorbing the mold that was in that house. There were, you know, some other items that we knew were a little bit more sentimental or something like that, but we were able to, you know, kind of utilize some ozone to sanitize those products as best as we could, because again, we don't want to bring any mold into our other house. But yeah, it was definitely a shock for me, but I think it was definitely all for the best once we got into the other house, and I was really able to, like, you know, use all of the knowledge that I had about mold from working with other patients and other things to be able to navigate that situation. But yeah, definitely a scary situation when I walked into that house. I was like, I can't believe it, you know, like, and I know that you and I had talked about it many times over about that, and that was a big push of as to why we were like looking for house, because I was like, I cannot do this, like I cannot live like this, and I'm seeing patients live like that, and I was like, I'm not gonna like willingly let myself live in that situation. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a very interesting occurrence for me. I think I was just like, whoa, like really eye-opening.
Yeah, and the strength is there, actually. When you use the tools to feel better, mold can die. It can leave the body. You can always have a little more susceptibility. There's always a risk of re-exposure or reinfection, things like that. But, you know, in my practice, the goal is to actually make the host stronger. Right. And so, yes, you can do testing, and, you know, you can test yourself, your environment. A lot of people talk about that. But at the end of the day, I say, make sure you are getting stronger. You know, a lot of people will put the money into remediating their house, which I get, but there's a lot of conversations there. And then what about actually making the host strong enough? Right? That's the important thing. Obviously, you want to work to get it out of your home. But when people are spending $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 on their house, $40,000, I've heard, and yet they're doing nothing for their own body, their house is now not sick, but they still are. Right. And that's where I'm like, okay, definitely want to improve the house, but you have to also realize that most of the time in remediation, the house is not completely remediated of mold. Right. And yes, you are not going to be completely remediated because there's always risk for re-exposure with the next season and things like that. But if you get stronger in your immune system, your nervous system, your hormone system, and you're equipped with the tools on how to address mold, that's for a long life. Right. And that's my kind of argument about this. One, telling people that there's mold exposure and mold illness or mold infection. So mold exposure, mold infection, mold illness, toxicity. It's really not in your head. It's actually could be that the mold is there with these psychiatric symptoms that are just so intense, and that, you know, it's very pervasive. And unfortunately, conventional medicine is saying, no, we have this perfect system in our body. We don't have a problem where, you know, anything gets in there and gets stuck. We don't have that. Every organ functions perfectly all the time. I mean, things just don't even make sense rationally. And again, look back to a few weeks ago when we did that, you know, how conventional medicine is failing you, and you'll really see that, you know, what are we expecting from the human body if we don't do anything to help it? Right. And I mean, that's maybe a little insight that you'll gain, or maybe I'm giving away that episode, but that's okay because I think there's a lot more to it.
It definitely is not in your head. It was definitely something I had to learn too, is like, it is not in my head that I'm feeling this way.
Right.
And you can do something about it and just, you know, make that shift and try to move forward.
Well, one of the things that you didn't say, but I don't even know that you said it as we've been talking over this for the last few years, but
right.
You've started to say, am I crazy?
Yes.
You know, I mean, how can I feel as, I'm
Yes.
not getting particularly older, like, I'm
Yes.
just doing the same old thing, but I keep getting worse. Am I crazy?
Yes.
And, that again is mold. But that's what I tell people all the time. It's mold. Like, if you're with a doctor that can recognize mold, it's obvious. But there's obviously good testing that some people want for validation, and that's really important too. But mold, people who work like me, doctors who work like me, they're like, you have a mold infection. This is important. So anyway, I think it's exciting that it's in the mainstream. Mycotoxins in the mainstream. Get out of your house. Yeah. Go. Get immunologically stronger. So we can have you healthy at 100.
Yeah.
And
that's always the goal.
That's the goal. Awesome. Thank you for listening. We'd love for you to subscribe, click, share, all those things. We have a checklist, kind of some details for, what is mold toxicity. So you can explain it to yourself again, because it's a new idea in a lot of ways. You can share it to someone else who's asking you, am I crazy? And you can be like, hey, actually, no, this doctor and this wonderful nurse have said, like, we're just ordinary people that have all these experiences in ourselves or in our patients, and even just people that we know in the community over the last, decades.
Right.
So, thanks, Richelle.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your story.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right. We'll
Bye.
See.